Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to pop in today. My name is Chelsea Meisner, and I'm a food scientist with Perennia. And my role is to provide support to the beverage industry via our beverage services. I've been in the food industry for 12 plus years now, with experience in all aspects of product development, manufacturing, and quality control for many different types of products. Over the years, though, my interest has found their way to beverage development, specifically craft alcoholic beverages and brewing. So naturally, I've been keeping an eye on this low to no alcohol trend, and to date have developed a couple products for local Nova Scotia companies. So we're here today to discuss the trending section of the beverage industry, low and no alcoholic beverages. Before COVID, the trend of having lower alcohol options was starting to become apparent. COVID definitely escalated that though, and consumers are interested in healthy living lifestyles, so are looking for options that have no alcohol or significantly less. According to a recent report that I was reading, 59% of global consumers are drinking more non or low alcoholic beverages than a year ago. However, consumers don't want to just drink a juice or a water. They still want to have a beverage experience and enjoy flavorful options similar to their alcoholic counterparts. Aside from health reasons, consumers also want to have better options as alternatives in social settings, or to enjoy during the day for relaxation, or at the end of the day during the week. Because of this, we're seeing a boom in development of a wide range of low to no alcoholic offerings across the globe. New products with the no alcohol claim have doubled in North America over the past year. Today, we're going to stick in our own backyard and have a discussion with two alcoholic beverage companies that have offerings, or in the process of having offerings, in the low to no alcohol space. First, though, just a couple quick housekeeping items. Today's session is brought to you by the Food and Beverage Business Accelerator Program, mouthful. And we're going to be having a panel discussion and then a question period at the end. So at any time, please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, try that good old magical trick of refreshing or reopening your browser. Sometimes being connected to a VPN can also mess these things up. So if you're on one, just disconnect. And if that doesn't work, swear at your computer for a little bit, always makes me feel better. But this discussion is being recorded, and it will be made available via our Food Feed newsletter at a later date. So if all else fails, you'll have access to it then. So let's kind of get into it now. Please welcome Comeau of Lake City Cider and Mitch Cobb of Upstreet Craft Brewing. Mitch, thank you for taking the time to be part of this panel today. Let's just start by having each of you kind of like introduce yourselves a little more and tell us about your companies. Poet, want to go first?
Great. My name is Poet. I own Lake City Cider downtown Dartmouth. I came into the beverage alcohol about 14 years ago, mostly through sales, which I developed a keen interest kind of more so on the wine side, selling a lot of wines from different areas in the world, which I guess I've always been a curious person. So I also wanted to become a sommelier. So that kind of led me into the sommelier field. I also leaned a little more heavily towards wine because beer just never liked me back. So although I liked to taste it, it just never made me feel great. So I had to find other alternatives. I had the fortunate opportunity to go to the UK when I was young, well, just at a university, and got to taste a lot of cider over there that was super interesting. A huge array of different styles and flavors, sweetnesses to dry, very dry, and kind of barnyardy kind of styles, only to come back to kind of be disappointed to what was actually offered locally. But my dad being growing up in Wolfville, I was very aware of all the U-picks and all the apples and fresh, fresh agriculture that was kind of right at our fingertips here in Nova Scotia. So eventually the two things, me being in the alcohol beverage industry and being super curious all the time, led me to eventually leave, working for somebody else, start kind of making those ciders that I think appealed a little bit more to my palate, thinking that maybe if I was looking for it, maybe so is somebody else. And we run into that a lot in the tap room, where people think they don't like cider, but it's just they haven't had the right cider. So we're always trying to kind of find that. So that's it. So basically, yep, the two, kind of my passion for cider and combined with my knowledge of selling an alcohol beverage. And then I'm a Dartmouth girl at heart. I grew up in Dartmouth. I love our little kind of area here between the lakes and the ocean. And there were some special things happening downtown Dartmouth with a few new businesses, and we decided to kind of put our roots down here, and it's been fantastic. So that's
just like this little booming spot.
It is. It has its own little area, has its own little, it does feel like a little downtown, a mini downtown. It's super walkable. It's very dynamic. You'll find, things. I feel like it's a true downtown. You don't find big conglomerates. You don't find franchises. You find usually, to be honest, most of the people that run and operate their shops live within the Dartmouth area. So you see people who actually live and breathe kind of the community of what Dartmouth is, which I do find it makes it unique. It's kind of why I did it. I have kids that, that are growing up in this community. So it's important for it to be a little more, whole. So that's it. So we make cider out of Nova Scotia apples and whatever other fruit we can get our hands on. And we are just in the process now of developing our recipes for a non-alcoholic cider. It's definitely something we've been asked for years in our tap room. And we're just kind of getting to the space where I think we have the kind of brain capacity to take on another project like this, because I do think that there's big differences in the production style. And more so stability that is, always worrisome. So that's where we're at.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Mitch.
Hi, my name is Mitch Cobb. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Upstreet Craft Brewing, based here in Charlottetown, PEI. My business partner and our brewmaster, Mike Hogan, started Upstreet in 2015. And grew it, over the last few years, and now have distribution throughout Atlantic Canada and in some other Canadian provinces on the alcohol side. And we really started looking, seriously at the non-alcoholic side in probably around 2018. Kind of after a few years of being in the beer business, I had gained a bunch of weight and was, not feeling on top of my game. And, I was sitting in the tap room at the bar one night and, contemplating life, I guess, I started to calculate the number of calories in craft beer, and, it was sort of like, holy shit, if I'm going to lose weight, that's what I need to do. I need to cut back on craft beer, and that's what I did. And so I still wanted to go out. I still wanted to socialize and be part of that experience that craft beer provides. And so Hoagie and I started talking about what it would take to make a non-alcoholic craft beer. And it kind of sat on the side. We did some pilot batches and experimented a little bit, did some research, looked at the different methods, and it was really during COVID, when COVID hit, and all of the restaurants closed down, and we lost that whole part of our business, that we decided, we really have to pivot. We have to start, thinking of ourselves less as a craft brewery and more as a beverage company. And we started releasing different beverage products. We launched Rewind, and then we launched Libra in October of 2020. Which has really sort of accelerated over the last couple of years.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of started talking about it. We can kind of, extend the topic a little bit, but kind of like specifically, deciding to go into this non-alcoholic space, why, like, you just touched on it a bit there, Mitch, and why, Upstreet decided to go down that route, but, doing a non-alcoholic version of an alcoholic product, as opposed to just kind of making a different non-alcoholic beverage. Like, why did you choose to kind of venture down that road, or in your case, going down that road? Because you could just make like a non-alc soda or something like that, right? So kind of what was driving that kind of thought process behind taking that direction?
I guess I'll start, but I guess for us, so people walk into your tap room and they always offer their lovely opinions on things you should be doing or could be doing. I've always been very niche with what we do. So we make cider, and that's what we make. We take apples and we ferment them, and that's kind of what we want to own. We want to own that space, and we want to do it well. And I mean, obviously in that space, it can be a pretty big pendulum of options. But so when I look at it, people come to me for cider. So the people that come to me and want a non-alcoholic option also want to experience what I make and be part of that. Because I think what is interesting about craft, and it's not all craft consumers, but a big chunk of craft consumers, especially the ones that come to the tap room, are the ones that have invested into what you're doing culturally and community wise. So they actually want to be part of something. They want to be part of what you're doing. And so for us, we're staying to our niche, and we want to create something that we can expand our audience to, so we can bring more people and say, hey, yeah, we make this awesome craft non-alcoholic, so everyone can basically come and enjoy it. And maybe they want to drink one every third beverage, or maybe it's more like they just don't drink alcohol at all. So I think it just opens us up to that consumer, and it still carries like what Lake City Cider stands for, as far as what our brand is it all about making absolutely premium, delicious craft cider, and that has to be both alcohol and non-alcohol. So yeah, we could totally mix up some like soda water and throw in some I don't know, flavorings or whatever, but I think it doesn't stick true to kind of what we're trying to accomplish in our main message.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very cool. Mitch, any more thoughts?
What I mean, because we have made soda in the past, and I think
nothing against soda.
No, nothing against soda. I mean, it's just, I guess, kind of like, with that question, it's just, curious, why, because there's a little more involved to creating the non-alcoholic counterpart, right? So that's kind of what I was,
Yeah, it's good. Now I'm asking myself, why didn't we just go with this? No, I mean, I think for us, beer is our passion. And like I said, when we were cutting back on the amount of craft beer we were consuming, we were looking for an alternative, and we're really interested in the process, and I mean, Hoagie's, very much a researcher and an experimenter, and that got him really excited about trying to figure out how we could do this. And it became sort of like a challenge. And as we sort of moved through the process, like I said, I mean, it kind of sat on the side for a while, and we were doing it here and there. But, as we were doing research into how to develop the recipe, we kept coming across a lot of information, coming out of Europe about the growth of the non-alcoholic market there. And, and it really kind of started to get momentum, and, we kind of reached a point where we were like, we want to go all in on this. Like we see a real opportunity here. And to Poet's comments too, like it was sort of the same for us. I mean, we had a lot of discussions around, where we say that we're a brewery that's rooted in the community. but we're only servicing a very small part of the community, and we want to be more inclusive. So we should be having more non-alcoholic offerings as well.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the general consensus now when it comes to beverages and things, is having both of those options for people at any type of event or at a tap room or anything like that. Like, it's, being inclusive. That's a big thing in many aspects of society today, and this is just another example of that. So when you were kind of getting going with Libra, and as you're getting going with your cider, like, what did you discover were like the main differences or new things that you had to consider when creating a non-alc or low alc versus your alcoholic product? Because there's some differences. So Mitch, if you want to start.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I know it's a big question.
I mean, initially it was trying to figure out how to go about it. When we were looking at, early on, we looked at vacuum distillation, we looked at reverse osmosis, and we did some testing with biofood tech over here to see what that looked like. And ultimately we decided to sort of develop our own process, which is somewhat close to arrested fermentation, but not really. So that was a big one, and for us, when we looked at it, it was a real sort of balancing act, because we wanted to be able to, obviously we wanted it to taste great, but we also wanted it to be relatively low in calories. So it was trying to find that sweet spot. So that became a bit of a challenge. Well, actually I could go on and on and on, and then the other, I mean, the big challenge for us was the food safety aspect, right? Because, in the brewery or in the alcohol space, while food safety is important because you have alcohol in there, there's not the same risks for pathogens, and so we had to completely overhaul the way we did everything, and it took us probably about a year to a year and a half. I mean, we're still, we're pretty, I should say we're pretty good now, but had to change the way everything that we do, I mean, breweries and alcohols, even what people are wearing into the breweries and all of the processes, all of the documentation. It took us, like I said, it took us a year to get food safety audit passed in order for us to be able to sell it into retailers, which was huge, but it was also a huge cultural shift that required a lot of effort and repetition, and
like the second you take alcohol out of something, you're in a regular beverage world.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different ball game. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, stability, flavor, those are kind of the two main things I encounter also when working with companies.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing for us too was trying to navigate, and I think it's shifted, actually I know it's shifted since, even in the last couple of years, but trying to navigate this public perception that non-alcoholic products should be cheaper because there's no alcohol in them, and really sort of fighting that myth. And even, we had developed our original recipes, but then we had to sort of scale them back because, you're using a lot more specialty grains, you're using a lot more hops, and even though there's no alcohol, you still end up with the same costs, or in our case, the original recipes were way more expensive, and we're like, we can't hit a price point that people are going to buy it, because it's probably going to come in more expensive than beer. I think at this stage, it's shifting, and people probably would pay if it tasted great. But that was a real sort of challenge out of the gate, was educating people on on the process and on the ingredients, and why it costs the same amount as a regular beer does.
Yeah, that's a valid, very interesting point, because it's just as much involved making a product like this. So yeah, a lot of people probably wouldn't really think about that when they're like going for something they're like, well, I don't want to pay. So you're just getting into it, Poi, but like, what are you discovering? Like it's you're on the front end of this wonderful journey.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, the stability thing is such a huge one. I mean, one thing that's great about even cider, like the ciders that we make, the stability is so high and the shelf life is usually longer than a lot of the craft beers that are on shelf. So there's a lot, when you develop those processes and you understand how you make your product, there's like this, it kind of feels nice. You're like, okay, good, we're comfortable and we can make these products and we can make them taste great. And we know that they're going to be safe and well enjoyed into the future. So stability was always a huge one. I mean, when you look at juice is a volatile thing. And if you don't do something to it, it's going to do something for itself. And so figuring out ways that meet flavor, meet that, the product quality that you want, and also can deliver something that tastes like it has to taste like an adult beverage. Like you touched on it in your opening, but we're not talking about people that want to come and drink apple juice. These people actually do want to enjoy a crafted beverage. And so I think that in some ways, yeah, it takes a lot more of rethinking kind of how you can do the process and deliver something that's worth enjoying. And I mean, I do think there's an education piece to it as far as the consumer is involved, but I think most people that are in demand for it or looking for it understand the cost. I mean, I don't think, Mitch, I feel like with you guys, you've had such a great, I know you've been doing it for a few years. It's not like you just started yesterday, but like you definitely see the value. And I know a lot of people that drink your beverages and they don't blink an eye at paying what they would pay for their beer, and they're actually happy to drink things that are that come through on the palate as well. And so like these types of beverages, and finding examples that are working and doing good jobs are also part of like what I'm looking at. Finding kind of examples of who's doing it well, and then kind of looking at it and going, okay, why is it working well? It's not too far long ago that Budweiser did a huge push on prohibition, and it totally flopped. It didn't do well. I don't even know if it still exists. It probably does, but they tried to launch it in the NSLC. They had a big push on it. There were stack codes everywhere. And it basically eventually got pushed to the back corner, and they didn't know what to do with it. And I'm not even sure if they sold through the stock that they brought in. And so although that was a while ago, I mean, I'm probably dating myself. That was probably 10 years ago, if not more. But I was in the liquor stores at that point, repping. I mean, that's, got to see kind of things that work and things that don't. So that's definitely at the back of my mind. So there's definitely and that's a big, that's a big company with lots of deep pockets to kind of do something and for it to flop. So I don't know if maybe, it wasn't there yet, or maybe it's because people who drink Budweiser want alcoholic beverages and the Budweiser consumer is not looking for non-alcoholic. So there's a few things you have to think about, I think, when you are developing, your brand. I mean, Mitch could probably speak to it more. They decided to develop a separate brand, right? Libra, and divert away from kind of the Upstreet, trademarks, I guess, or branding, and made it something totally different. So it's just interesting to kind of look at and weigh out all those kind of options.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it, and like, as per like Bud and like Heineken, like all those big guys have their versions of non-alcoholic and have had them for a long time. So like the concept of it's not new, but what's happening today is new. Like, and consumers are changing. Like, obviously you're always going to have your group of humans who like their bud and you know, and that realm. And maybe they do go for a non-alc version once in a while, but you're right, that prohibition did not do great. So, but which I think is also telling of what maybe people who are interested in non-alc, the standard they're starting to hold those products at, right? You know, they want something that tastes good. And,
Totally.
you know, I mean, I don't mean to like, you know, crap on bud or anything, but, you know, you know, it's gotta taste good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely something. And I mean, we're seeing in the trend anyway, you know, what consumers are expecting out of their lower or no alcoholic experience, right? And they, like you said, they want it to taste like an adult beverage still.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all kind of like, you got to kind of make that for them, not just having like a diluted version of something, or, you know, something with good flavor, and, you know, to really, so that they can enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I mean, like you said, the market is really shifting. And I mean, you know, I think when Budweiser Prohibition came out, and, you know, there was always those older non-alcoholic beers that, yeah, sat on the shelf and no one really bought, you know, but there was always, even when we were starting, there was this perception when we told people we were going to make a non-alcoholic beer, that it was sort of like, oh, that's so nice that you're doing something for people who can't drink, you know. There's this sort of hard line in the stand, and, you know, either you drank or you didn't drink. And if you didn't drink, it was because you had issues with alcohol, or you had health reasons that prevented you from drinking. And I mean, we're seeing, you know, even in just in the last couple of years, that has like completely shifted. And, you know, our tap room is a great example of, like, people will come in and they'll sit down and they'll have a 6% IPA, and then they'll have a couple of Libras because they aren't ready to leave and they want to hang out, but they have to drive. Or, you know, they'll come in and they'll buy a 4-pack of, you know, IPAs and a 4-pack of Libras, and that's kind of their evening. And so it's really sort of shifted to more about moderation, you know, but people still want that same flavor that they would come to expect from an alcoholic beverage, right, regardless of what it is, because they are sort of mixing it in. And it really is a much younger generation who's purchasing, you know, primarily sort of millennials, right? So it's kind of the image in your head of the person who's, this is going to be very stereotypical, but, you know, the person who's drinking Budweiser Prohibition is probably like older and male, and, you know, sitting at home watching the game, having a Budweiser Prohibition, you know. And the people who are drinking kind of craft non-alcoholic beverages are young, and they want to go out and they want to socialize, and they want something cool in their hand. They don't want to feel like they're left out of the party by drinking a glass of water, you know. And that's sort of the real shift, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely is the shift. Like, you know, I'm a home brewer, so, you know, I'm a beer nerd, alcohol drinking kind of, you know, but yet, you know, whenever, you know, I get out of this introvertness that COVID has created and actually decide to go out into society again and like enjoy and go to parties and things like that, you know, it's like, you're alcoholic, you're non-alcoholic. Like, it's to have that option. And, you know, it's so nice to have that now and be able to enjoy, and not just be like, okay, well, I'm going to have my alcoholic drink, I'll go chug some water and then, you know, wait half an hour and then have my next, you know. So, but like now it's like, you can, it is a bit of a social thing, but like also it just allows you to moderate it too. And the fact that is becoming something that is, I guess, acceptable is the right term, is allowing, you know, people to make these changes and be mindful of health, be mindful, you know, of not, you know, I mean, obviously, if you want to go have a fun night and have lots of drinks, like, yeah, go for it. But, you know, sometimes it's, you know, you don't want to be hungover the next day, you know? So, I know we kind of talked kind of like a bit about the trends there, and we'll circle back to that. But challenges that, and you touched on a bit of it with, stability, and, food safety, like those are all new things that alcoholic producers have to kind of become familiar with and impart into their, facilities. But any other type of challenges, labeling, retail, like what is that stuff that is definitely, different and that you have to work towards overcoming? Whoever wants to go.
We don't, other than the demand is there and we get asked for it. I think it's there. I will say, I guess I'll keep my part brief on this because I'm still new into the segment. I will say, like, the labeling thing is definitely a bit of a headache at first to wrap your head around, to really understand it. But anything new it's kind of like, but that's what we signed up for as far as, taking on your own business. You're always trying to understand new things and develop them. It's hard when you have to comply sometimes, but it's part of doing business, and it's part of being in the food kind of development sector. It is what it is. You just have to do it. So I would say, yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve on that, just the different processes, but they have solutions. These aren't problems that you're making up new solutions for. These are just kind of compliance stuff that you have to just learn. So on that side, not so much. And I'm not there yet. So I don't know.
No, yeah.
I'm still in the fun stage of, like, being creative and developing stuff. So it hasn't been so bad.
Yeah. Now, Mitch, you guys have gotten into retail. Obviously, you're in the grocery store chains and all that. And I know the NSLC has its own challenges, but retail also. So what kind of have you encountered with that?
So in terms of like labeling and things like that, one of the challenges that we're kind of coming up against now too, that I think, is the rules around non-alc products in Canada are a bit ambiguous, and the way that CFIA sort of labels it is anything below 1.1%. Although the international standard is 0.5%, the LCBO says 0.5%, but the LCBO testing facility can only test within a range of 0.5%. So you can't get, a super accurate reading when you're sending it away to be tested. And we test in-house, but in order to get kind of a third-party lab to test, which typically we use the LCBO, that creates an issue, and it creates even more of an issue when you start moving into the States, and it's like a strict under 0.5%. And there's sort of serious consequences to making a non-alcoholic beer that isn't technically non-alcoholic, and even from like the perspective of there's a lot of people who have like a 0.0% tolerance of non-alcoholic products, like they don't have alcohol at all. So for us, we also ran into challenges when we were putting it on tap, and it was, people were saying, servers were saying it was non-alcoholic when really technically it wasn't, and even that 0.4% can be a trigger for people. So there's a lot of challenges around that I expect that CFIA is probably, as the sector grows, is going to get a bit more defined on what actually is a non-alcoholic product. And and that kind of goes to for the labeling. The US seems to be much more rigid when it comes to labeling non-alcoholic products, in terms of like not being able to say lager or ale or stout or so I think we'll see that coming soon, but the ambiguity is also a challenge, because you don't ever know if you're really doing it right, so to speak, right? And trying to figure it out yourself, and it's hard to find anyone who has a concrete answer on what the best way to do it is. From the retail perspective, tons of challenges there. And it's interesting because one of the drivers of us getting into the non-alcoholic space was that, we were like, this is going to be great. It's not going to be regulated the same way that beer is. It's not going to be taxed the same way. We're going to make so much money. We're going to be able to ship it online. The margins are going to be huge, direct to consumer. It was sort of the like, uneducated mindset that we had kind of going into it, and quickly found out that like, it's a whole other set of challenges, in terms of like, yeah, we can do D2C, but you're effectively shipping cans of water in the winter across the country. So that creates all sorts of challenges, and the margin gets eaten up by shipping costs. For anyone, anyone who's shipping out alcoholic products knows that hasn't really turned out to be the golden goose that it seems. And, there's a lot of challenges with dealing with big retailers. I mean, the food safety piece was a huge part that took a long time, and it's certainly required, but major retailers have the same types of regulations, and in a lot of senses, they may even be more rigid than some liquor commissions, and in terms of margins, they get eaten up just as quick. I mean, you don't have the tax, but you have, you need distributors, you need brokers, retailers take a high percentage. So, that was all sort of like, oh, wow. Okay. So actually the margins on non-alcoholic beers aren't, our margins aren't any better on non-alcoholic beers than they are with beer. And it's a whole new system to learn. Like, Poet said, like, it's a whole different set of challenges, but there's certainly challenges there. And then, the other side of it is now, liquor commissions are starting to look at it. I mean, it's interesting, when we launched in PEI, there was a rule that said anything over 0.0% had to be sold through the liquor store. So,
oh yes, kombucha gate.
Kombucha gate, exactly. And so it was almost one of those things where like they're so far behind, they're ahead, and so we had to sell at the liquor store, which was great, because we got to see all of the sales data, which has sort of helped us along the way, and I think we've spent a lot of time really working with the liquor commissions, trying to educate them on who this new consumer is, right. And that like people want to be able to go in and buy their alcohol with their non-alcoholic products. And actually, I mean, a study just came out from Nielsen a couple months ago, and it's kind of a staggering, like 82% of people who buy non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits also buy alcohol.
Yeah.
And that's who the consumer is. And so they want to buy it in the same place. And so the LCBO has been really good at sort of moving the needle forward and carrying more non-alcoholic products. And so it's also trying to like educate, other liquor commissions to follow suit. But, then you're back into the liquor channels with all the same headaches that we had with alcohol. So, yeah. So, it's not, I mean, we were really naive. We thought it was going to be easy. We thought that there was like this straight line with no regulations, and it was, ultimately it was as challenging, or probably more challenging than the alcohol space.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It sounds wonderful when you're kind of like getting into it, and coming from the alcoholic side, like it might come across first as being simpler, but in reality, like it's just as involved, just as regulated, just as many challenges. Like you're just taking on a whole new set of things. Yeah, absolutely. So where are we for time here? Oh, we're plugging along pretty good. So let's talk about the trends a little bit. We've kind of been, touching on it, but, here in our own backyard in the Maritimes, like, what are we kind of like, obviously you guys are creating these for, your customers, and, for your, with your brand image in mind and things like that. But like, how are we kind of seeing this, this trend going here in the Maritimes? And then we can talk wider too. Like we all kind of know how it's kind of running in Canada, where the states are going. And then, I mean, Europe is they've gone to the races with this. So just kind of like, you know, how we see it going and in now, like, and maybe in like a couple of years, like, where do you think like we're gonna end up? Whoever, leave it open.
I mean, just from doing, you know, research and, you know, reading about what's happening in other places, I don't think we're that far behind. We'll say the wave of of change. I don't want to call it a trend because I don't think it's a trend. I think that it's a realization of a new niche in the market of craft beverage.
It's a good way to put it. I like that.
And I think it's, you know, it speaks to the 80%, like Mitch just mentioned, of people who purchase non-alcoholic beverages in the alcohol sector with alcohol versions of maybe the same brands or varying options. And so I think it's all, you know, for me, I think it's about looking at some of the other, we'll call them trends or waves that are happening. And it's about people who want better tasting products and will pay for it because they will enjoy it. Like I always say, like, I don't eat burnt toast. I want a nice piece of bread or whatever. And it goes the same, I think, with the craft beverage. It's like when you sit down somewhere, whether it's at your dining room table or if it's in a pub, you want to buy options that are tasty and delicious and satisfy you know, whatever that sensation you're looking for and give you an experience. And that wave's happening. So, and we're seeing that across all basically alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. So people are seeking better spirits, better beer, better ciders, better wines. You know, there's always going to be the economic purchaser, but there's this segment of consumers that are looking for something more. So they are willing to buy less volume and pay more for it, for better tasting options. And I think the non-alcohol segment it's just, I think that what the miss is that there wasn't the offerings. So what we're seeing is we just didn't have offerings in our market. And so therefore the purchasers didn't see the opportunity because you can't have sales unless there's something on the shelf. And there literally was nothing on the shelf. Yeah. And so I think, you know, when you look at Libra and the success that it's had, and I think the amount of awareness that there is now versus, you know, back a few years ago, based on the growth, it speaks to speaking to that niche of consumers that are looking for the experience over and the value over, you know, necessarily the volume. And so this is just, I just think it was underserviced. I honestly think that again, not a trend. We might see it as a trend just because it's kind of there where it wasn't there before, especially in Canada and especially maybe more so in Maritimes. But I think it's that, there just wasn't the offerings. So now that we see the offerings, we're actually seeing, oh, wow, people are actually really interested and engaged. And so, I'm excited to see, you know, more better quality products and more of them coming out, and it will grow that segment and awareness for the consumer.
Same.
Yeah.
Mitch, anything to add?
I mean, I would totally echo what Poet said, you know, and I think, you know, the interesting thing, you know, it was exciting when we were getting going, and, you know, and you go on these Facebook groups, and there's Facebook groups for, you know, sober curious people or, you know, non-alcoholic beverages. And, you know, there's seemed like such a correlation between the non-alcoholic consumer and the craft beer consumer, and that, you know, they're talking about this new product that they found, and they're trading beers, and they're doing all of these things, and they're trying new things, and there's this real sense of exploration for the consumer. And once they start to try one product, they want to try more. And like Poet said, I mean, there just wasn't anything in the market, you know, and kind of circling back to the PEI Liquor Commission piece, like when we talked to them, you know, when we first put Libra in the liquor stores, they said that it didn't matter what they brought in for non-alcoholic products, the category stayed flat for like 20 years. And Libra came in, and, you know, the category has grown 30% in the liquor stores. And I think that, you know, that's not a nod to us per se, but I think it's just a nod to like, people just wanted something new. You know, and I think that like, you know, we're seeing a lot of new innovation come out in the beer space, in the spirit space, and the cider and wine space. And as more of that innovation continues, more people will get interested in it. You know, I think the other trend that I am starting to see more and more, especially now that restaurants are coming out of COVID and out of survival mode, you know, is a lot more restaurants are starting to put together non-alcoholic drink menus, which is really exciting. And it's not just like the Budweiser Prohibition or Heineken 0.0. That's not even, you know, the dusty bottle at the back of the cooler kind of thing, you know, and so that's really exciting. And I think that, you know, when people have a chance to experiment and trial in a restaurant, it's going to, you know, lead to a purchase down the road, right? So I think that'll be really, I mean, I can't wait for the day when you can walk into any restaurant and order a non-alcoholic, like a great tasting non-alcoholic beverage. Like,
exactly.
You know.
No, it's definitely a lot of, I think, exciting things to come. And, you know, from the development side of it, I'm just like, can't wait to kind of create things. Because there's, it's a kind of an open canvas to a degree, what we, you know, what you can create and come up with. And I think we will just see, you know, lots of cool things. So we're down to like 12 minutes, so we should probably get some questions in. Just before that, quick little Perennia plug. I snuck our URL into the chat for our beverage services website. So you can go there to sign up for a newsletter. And also, if you have any further questions about our services and things like that, the contact information and everything is there. So we got a couple questions here. First one, is there consideration, much like alcoholic containing beer for storage on retail shelves, at ambient versus refrigeration? Would this affect the flavor, or is it more stable?
Is that that's the question?
Sorry. In consideration for. So I guess the question is with temperature. So like having a non-alcoholic versus an alcoholic, if you're, you know, like shelf, like on the shelf versus in a fridge, is there any kind of differences with the flavor and things like that?
Yeah. Our goal is to produce something, because it's very expensive to have reefer trucks, and it's not guaranteed when you deal with commissions that they will even refrigerate your product. So our goal is to provide something that's shelf stable at room temperature. Now, I would say to anybody, if you can keep it in the fridge, keep it in the fridge.
Yeah.
Definitely don't heat it up, no matter what, especially with a carbonated product. Don't heat it up. But our goal is, because we don't control transport, like how things get to place, and if it's going to sit in a truck or if it's going to sit in a warehouse, and the NSLC's warehouse is not temperature controlled, as far as it doesn't keep it in a fridge. It's a warehouse temperature, so it might be nice and cool, but not but definitely not a fridge. So given that, I guess it depends on you know, what are your goals for your product? So if you know that you're going to keep it in-house and sell it in-house, and you have a great walk-in that you can keep it in, great. Maybe you can cut some corners on different things and how you produce it, and your stability can be a little bit maybe different. But I think that if your goal is in your idea is to get it out to other places and to start shipping, that you're best off creating something from the beginning that's shelf stable at room temperature. And
I mean, it all comes down to supply.
Flavors won't change. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same with non-alcoholic beer as it is with beer. You know, certainly there's some flavor degradation over time, especially with the hops. But you know, ultimately, if you're selling it into a retailer, you have to expect that it's going to sit warm. So you have to really design it for that type of environment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is just kind of the way it is. Okay, second one we've got here. are you finding consumers are looking for low alcoholic options as much as the no alcohol options, or is it generally a desire for no alcohol?
I mean, we Upstreet has put out a few low alcohol options, like in the 3 to 4% range, and more low calorie beers. You know, I mean, they do okay. They certainly don't do as well as non-alcoholic options. And I think if you look at like kind of industry-wide statistics, the low alcohol options, because that was sort of, I mean, something that everyone was talking about a while ago, haven't performed as well and don't have nearly the growth that non-alcoholic options do. And, you know, I think it kind of gets back to that point that I was making earlier, saying, you know, about like how someone will come in and have like a 6% IPA and then a non-alcoholic, like people are kind of moderating themselves by mixing them up versus like choosing a low alcohol option. But again, I think it all comes down to flavor though, right? Like if you have a great tasting low alcohol beer, people will purchase it.
Yeah, but it's interesting, much to Mitch's point. When you look at some of the, we'll say trends, is that low alcohol, like really low or non, is trending, but so is high alcohol options are also trending. So we get probably the equalist amount of people saying like, oh, how much alcohol is that? And it's meant as a good thing to the same question, meaning like, what do you have on the low end? So it's just, you have different consumers wanting different things when it comes to that alcohol percentage. But typically we've tried a few, like low, we'll say below 4%, not super low, but they just do okay. They don't, you know, they don't usually blow it up. It's not, it's either people are drinking it, but that's not the factor. Like they're just drinking it because they want to try it because it's new. But that's not the factor of why they're choosing it. But I do have consumers that do choose high alcohol because, and that's a factor in their decision-making, is that it's high.
Yeah, sometimes it goes with style of things too, right? You know, there's some higher alcohols out there. I mean, give me a good barrel aged, you know, that's way up there. Okay, we still have time for one or two more. Okay, let's see here. What contributed to your decision to create a separate brand for alcohol-free products? Knowing what you know now, would you have gone about it different, or you can share any pros and cons of using same brand versus creating a new one? I guess that's Mitch.
Yeah. It's a good question. I'm trying to think back to why we decided to do it like that. You know, I mean, I think when we were starting it, you know, and I think as we, you know, as the market continues to develop, there's going to be a lot of brewery cideries, wineries who add a non-alcoholic beer as part of their kind of flagship offerings. You know, for us, we really wanted to build a separate brand with larger potential to grow. That was always sort of our goal. And so, you know, we talked about, you know, do we do non-alcoholic versions of Do-Gooder or White Noise, or, you know, and keep it under Upstreet. And we thought that it may be confusing, you know, and I mean, in fact, you know, like it's always sort of been our goal that Libra would, you know, eventually be its own company, which it now is, you know, and would have like a different kind of set of goals and objectives than Upstreet. So from a branding perspective, it's been really interesting. Like, I think that you know, I think it was a good idea for us to have a different brand that sort of was more representative of non-alcoholic beer, you know, and initially, you know, we wanted to keep Upstreet's name attached to it because, you know, regionally Upstreet has some brand recognition to help get it going, but it's actually sort of flipped the switch a little bit where, you know, now it's like Libra is helping Upstreet get brand recognition, you know, like when we got our listing at the LCBO for Libra, you know, it was that listing that sort of led to us getting an OTO, a couple OTOs with Upstreet, and it's become sort of our lead in to get new accounts where, everyone is looking for a non-alcoholic beer, but then they'll take Upstreet too. So it sort of has shifted a little bit, but I think, that was sort of the rationale. I still feel like it was definitely the right one.
Yeah, it's always, I guess you just kind of to take a jump sometimes too, right? And decide, but it does come down to marketing.
Yeah.
You know what? I think we're almost out of time. So I don't, if we didn't get to your question, sorry. But please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any further questions. We obviously could probably sit here and talk about this for a while. It's a big topic. So thank you both for taking the time to join me today. It was wonderful to have this conversation with you and talk about, all the exciting things that are to come in this part of the industry. Like I said, any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And as I said earlier, this is being recorded and will be available via our food feed newsletter in the coming days, in a little bit. So yeah, thank you to everyone who joined us. And yeah, I guess the last thing to say is we got an upcoming holiday season. So however you choose to celebrate, may you have a happy and a safe one. So thank you, everyone, and cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.